Hello everyone, so this is Miss Cruz, and the story that I'm going to be reading, the memoir, is called Fist, Stick, Knife, Gun. And it's a personal history of violence by Jeffrey Canada, and I'm going to read the first chapter, the first excerpt from chapter 1, which is called The Jacket. My father left us when I was 4, and we moved to the South Bronx. He left us 4 boys, no child support, no nothing. Down the block from us was a playground. It was nearby, and we didn't have to cross the street to get there. We were close in age. My oldest brother, Daniel, was 6. Next came John, who was 5. I was 4, and my brother Reuben was 2. Reuben and I were unable to go to the playground by ourselves because we were too young. But from time to time, my 2 oldest brothers would go there together and play. I remember them coming inside one afternoon, having just come home from the playground. There was a great excitement in the air. My mother noticed right away and asked, "Where's John's jacket?" My brother John responded, This boy, he took my jacket." Well, we all figured that was the end of it. That was the end of that. My mother would have to go and get the jacket back. But the questioning continued. "What do you mean he took your jacket?" I was playing on the sliding board, and I took my jacket off and left it on the bench, and this boy, he tried to take it. And I said it was my jacket, and he said he was going to take it, and he took it. And I tried to take it back, and he pushed me and said he was going to beat me up. To my mind, John's explanation was clear and convincing. This case was closed. I was stunned when my mother turned to my oldest brother Daniel and said, "And what did you do when this boy was taking your brother's jacket?" Daniel looked shocked. What did he have to do with this? And we all recognized the edge in my mother's voice. Daniel was being accused of something, and none of us knew what it was. Daniel answered, "I didn't do nothing. I told Johnny not to take his jacket off. I told him." My mother exploded. "You let someone take your brother's jacket and you did nothing? That's your younger brother. You can let people just take your things? You can't let people just take your things. You know, I don't have money for another jacket. You better not ever do this again. Now go back there and get your brother's jacket." My mouth was hanging open. I couldn't believe it. What was my mother talking about? Go back and get it? Dan and John were the same size. If the boy was going to beat up John, well, he'd certainly beat up Dan. We wrestled all the time and occasionally hit one another in anger, but none of us knew how to fight. We were all equally incompetent when it came to fighting, so it made no sense to me. If my mother hadn't had that look in her eyes, I would have protested. Even at 4 years old, I knew this wasn't fair. But I also knew that look in my mother's eyes, a look that signified a line not to be crossed. My brother Dan was in shock. He felt the same way I did. He tried to protest. "Ma, I can't beat that boy. It's not my jacket. I can't get it. I can't." My mother gave him an ultimatum. "You go there and get your brother's jacket, or when you come back, I'm going to give you a beating that will be 10 times as bad as what the little thief could do to you. And John, you go with him. Both of you bring that jacket back here." The tears began to flow. Both John and Dan were crying. My mother ordered them out. Dan had this look on his face that I had seen before. A stern determination showed through the tears. For the first time, I didn't want to go with my brothers to the park. I waited a long 10 minutes. Then, to my surprise, John and Dan triumphantly strolled into the apartment. Dan had John's jacket in his hand. My mother gathered us all together and told us we had to stick together, that we couldn't let people think we were afraid, that what she had done in the making, Dan go out and get the jacket, was to let us know that she would not tolerate our becoming victims. I listened, unconvinced, but I knew that in not going with Dan and John, I'd missed something important. Dan was scared when he left the house. We were all scared. I knew I could never have faced up to that boy. How did Dan do it? I wanted to know everything. What happened? How did you do it? Did you have to fight? Did you beat him up? I asked. Dan explains that when he went back to the playground, the boy was still there, wearing John's jacket. He went up to him and demanded the jacket. The boy said no. Dan grabbed the jacket and began to take it off the boy. Dan was still crying, but the boy knew it was not fear from him. A moment of resistance, but Dan's determination prevailed. The boy grew scared, and Dan wrestled the jacket free. He even managed a threat. "You better never bother my brother again," as the boy fled. Dan's description of the confrontation left me with more questions. I was trying to understand why Dan was able to get the jacket. If he could get it later, why didn't he take it back the first time? How come the boy didn't fight? What scared him off? Even at 4 years old, I knew I needed to know these things. I needed some clues on which I could build a theory of how to act. Dan's story couldn't help me much. It took many years of playing and hanging on the streets of the South Bronx before I began to put together the pieces of the theory. The only real lesson I learned from the jacket episode was if someone takes something from you, tell your mother you lost it. Otherwise, you might be in danger of getting your face punched in by some boy on the streets of New York City. This was a valuable bit of understanding for a 4-year-old in the Bronx.